Hi YouTube. Today I am making tomato soup from Preps. I wish my tripod was just a little bit higher. I can't quite get into my pot. But prior to starting the video, I diced one large onion and sauteed that in about 4 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 tablespoon of butter until it started getting a little bit brown. You don't want it crispy, you just want to start to brown it. That will help add some sweetness, some natural sweetness to the to the tomatoes. After they started getting slightly brown, I put some very finely diced celery in. Now, you don't really have to be too specific about the size. I am going to use an immersion blender at the end to make everything smooth. Now, your onions and celery could both have been dehydrated, onion and celery. I didn't want to use that today, but you certainly could. You would just want to rehydrate it first. And then I would still saute the onions a little bit to try to get some color to them once you drain the liquid off. Alright, I also have over here, which isn't pertinent to the recipe at the moment, but I have 1 can of tomatoes that I'm letting sit in the sieve. The reason being that some of my folks like to have chunky tomato soup. I prefer mine smooth, so those who like can add theirs at the end. I'm draining the liquid off and I will be putting that back in the pot at some point. Now, before we get started, I also wanted to mention that I wanted to use my dehydrated sweet peppers. However, I have vacuum sealed that jar using my food sealer, and I cannot get that sucker open to save my life. So that's something that one of my big strong fellas will have to do for me, and they're not here right now. So anyway, on we go with the project. It's very simple. Into my sauteed vegetables, which, by the way, if I did have the peppers, I would have rehydrated them and put them in with the celery and onions. Just to continue softening up a little bit, I'm going to add now 2 cans of tomatoes. Hunt's probably GMO tomatoes. If you had your own canned tomatoes, by all means, use those. And I realize that if this is for an SHTF situation, you may not have an immersion blender, but you might. You might have some kind of a hand blender or something and be able to use it. And if you don't, you go with the chunky. The last option would be that if you don't want it chunky, you could use just tomato paste and rehydrate that. Now, I'm probably going to use some of this to add thickness later on, but I'm not going to do that until I know what I'm dealing with. Also into the pot, I am going to add, just because I have it and it sounds good to me, over here I have some kale that I was going to go south, so I dehydrated it. That's the green stuff up here. Down here I have a little bit of beet powder, which I bought at a online spice place that I use. It's my spice sage, I think it's called. And this is going to add some extra nutrition. In addition, it's going to add some natural sweetness. So I may not need to add any sugar. Later on when I taste it, that's when I'll decide. And this is a little bit of powdered thyme. I'm using powdered again because I just don't want the chunks of thyme in it. So I'm going to set this on to simmer. Let it cook for, probably, I'm going to guess 20 minutes or so. Add my spices and stuff in. Actually, I'm going to do that now. Then I will come back, taste, and revisit the situation. I'll be back. I'm adding 1 more can of tomatoes because 3 just doesn't look like enough for me. Or actually, that was 2 in the pot and 1 over here for those who want to add. But, you know, my guys like to eat, so I'd rather have a little left over than not have enough. That's for 4 people, 3 big guys, and me. Also, a grind of black pepper. And just do that to taste. We like pepper, so I'm going to go for it. Okay, this has been boiling for about a half an hour. And because this is only vegetables, you don't have to worry about it boiling hard. If there was meat in this, you would not want to boil the soup this hard, but I'm just trying to break everything down. I know it's plenty moist, so I don't have to worry about it sticking on the bottom. And at this point, I'm going to use my immersion blender. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. It really doesn't need to be going that hard. I'm going to turn down my, I'm going to use my immersion blender. You could, if you don't have one, for me that's the easiest way. You could put this in a regular blender. If you did that, I would wait until this is quite a bit cooler. And with hot liquids, you always want to be careful in a blender because it can literally blow the lid off it and go all over. So make sure it's slightly vented and that you have your hand over the lid. You could also use a food processor if that's what you have. And I'm not going to do this with the video on because it's going to be loud and obnoxious. So I'll be back when I'm done. Alrighty. You can see that after the immersion blender it's much smoother, and it's a lighter color now, I think, because it's probably incorporated a lot of air in this. This is my first time doing this, by the way, so I'm kind of all in this together. Anyway, I tasted it and I think it needs two things. I think it needs a little more salt and a little more sweetness. Now, instead of adding just plain salt, which you certainly could do, I'm going to add some chicken base. This is Miner's chicken base. I get this at BJ's. McCormick's makes a similar one. Anyway, put that in there and the heat of the soup is going to dissolve that. And then I'm also going to add probably about a tablespoon of honey. You could use sugar, you could use agave, brown sugar. Don't think molasses would work. And I don't know that I would recommend maple syrup, but just about any other sweetener will do the trick. It's all about your personal preference and what you have on hand. This is really hot, so it should dissolve instantly. Another thing you could do with this, if you like creamed tomato soup, you could add milk or cream or evaporated milk. Like with anything, it's all your personal taste. You could add garlic if you want to add garlic, and I might before I'm done. Might even add a little more pepper. And I'm going to hopefully do another video. I'm going to serve these with, instead of the traditional grilled cheese, which is yummy, I'm going to do a cheese toast souffle. Not necessarily from Preps, although it could be if you had access to eggs. And I'm going to do that on a different video though, so, or hopefully I'm going to do that on a different video if I get to it. Alright, it's really hot, but let me give it a taste. Yeah, that made a huge difference. Huge difference. Alright, well I think that's pretty good right there. So that part of supper is ready. Hope you try it. It really is good and super duper easy. But I would have liked some of those peppers in it. Those sweet peppers I think would have been good. Take good care, folks.